I arrived in Montana Territory with 2 trunks, a land deed, and something to prove. The stagecoach dropped me at the edge of what would become my property, 20 acres of prairie grass and possibility. No husband waiting. No man's name attached to mine. Just land, lumber, and my own 2 hands. The town's sympathetic looks told me everything. They'd expected me to fail before I started. A woman alone. Building a cabin, the mercantile owner had tried steering me toward more suitable accommodations in town. I'd smiled politely and ordered another dozen nails. I wasn't running from anything. At least, that's what I told myself those first nights alone in my tent, listening to the wind sweep across the prairie. I was running toward something. Independence. Proof that I could build a life on my own terms, without anyone's permission or approval. Every letter from back east had carried the same question, when will you marry? As if a woman's worth was. Measured in wedding bands rather than what she could create with her own hands. As if the only life worth building was one constructed around a man's name and his ambitions. I'd left all that behind. Left the parlors and the tea parties and the pitying glances. Left the well-meaning relatives who spoke about me in hushed tones. As if being unmarried at 26 was a tragedy rather than a choice. The first log I lifted alone nearly broke me. My back screamed. My palms blistered almost immediately. Splinters drove beneath my nails, but beneath the pain, I felt something stronger. Pride. Each log became both burden and badge of honor. See, I wanted to shout to everyone who doubted, see what I can do without any of you. The prairie stretched endlessly around me. The sky was bigger than anything I'd known back east, where buildings crowded close and opinions crowded closer. Here, there was space, room to breathe, room to build, room to become whatever I'd decided to be. I worked until my hands bled, until the sun set and painted the western sky in shades of copper and gold, until exhaustion made my muscles tremble and my vision blur. That night, I set out 1 plate for dinner in my tent, 1 cup, 1 fork. I studied them in the lamplight, these solitary implements of my solitary life. Told myself 1 plate was enough. Had always been enough. Would always be enough. But some part of me, some small, stubborn part, I tried to ignore, wondered if I was trying to convince myself of something that wasn't quite true. By the end of my first week, I had 4 walls started and proof that I could do this. Proof that I was strong enough, capable enough, determined enough to build a life alone. I just didn't know yet that proving I could do it alone wasn't the same as proving I should. I first noticed him on my 3rd day of construction. I was positioning a log along the north wall, my back bent, my arms straining, when I felt it the weight of being watched. I looked up and saw him. A man on horseback at the tree line, maybe 100 yards distant. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just observed. My skin prickled with discomfort. I gripped my hammer tighter and tried to ignore the feeling of being studied, tried to focus on the work. But awareness of his presence followed me through the rest of that afternoon, like a shadow I couldn't shake. The next day, he was there again. Same distance, same silence, same unsettling attention. My irritation built with each passing hour. Was I entertainment, a curiosity, a woman alone? Struggling with logs, probably waiting for me to fail so he could ride into town and share the story over. Whiskey. By the 5th day, I'd had enough. I straightened from positioning a log, wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand, and called out, "You planning to watch all summer, or do you have business here?" He removed his hat slowly, ran a hand through dark hair touched with gray at the temples. Even from a distance, I could see weariness in the slope of his shoulders, in the way he sat his horse like a man who'd forgotten why he was still sitting anywhere at all. "No business, ma'am," he said. His voice carried clearly across the space between us. Just watching someone build something. It's been a long time since I've seen that. The loneliness in his voice caught me off guard. I'd prepared for mockery, for condescension, for the 100 small cruelties men sometimes inflicted on women who dared to step outside their expected places. But loneliness that I hadn't expected. I softened slightly despite myself. "Well, there's not much to see. Just a woman and some logs. That's more than most folks manage," he said quietly. Then he replaced his hat and rode away. I stood there watching him go, confused by the exchange, by the sadness that seemed to hang around him like morning mist. That evening, I walked to Mrs. Chen's boarding house for supplies. She was the kind of woman who knew everything about everyone, and she told me his story without my asking. Thomas Garrett, widower, lost his wife and baby daughter to fever 2 winters past. Kept mostly to himself since then, working odd jobs around the territory, drifting through days like a man who'd forgotten his own purpose. I thought about that as I walked back to my property in the fading light. Thought about the loneliness I'd heard in his voice. Recognized it, if I was honest. Loneliness knows loneliness, the way pain recognizes pain. The next morning, I found a stack of seasoned timber near my foundation, better quality than what I'd purchased from the lumber yard. The wood was straight-grained and true. The kind that would build walls that wouldn't warp or twist with time. No note. No explanation. Just wood that would make my cabin stronger. I should have been grateful. Should have appreciated the kindness. Instead, I felt invaded. I didn't need anyone's pity. Didn't need their charity. Didn't need them. I was building this alone. That was the entire point. The roof beam arrived at the lumberyard a week later. 12 feet of solid pine that would span my cabin's width and support the roof structure. The delivery man took one look at me and shook his head. "Ma'am, that beam weighs near 200 pounds. You'll need help getting it into place." "I'll manage," I said, with more confidence than I felt. I did not manage. My first attempt ended with the beam crashing back to the ground, nearly taking me with it. The second attempt left new bruises blooming across my shoulders. The third attempt ended with me sitting in the dirt, breathless and furious, staring at the beam that refused to cooperate with my determination. On the fourth attempt, Thomas Garrett appeared at my side. I hadn't heard him approach, hadn't seen him ride up. He was just suddenly there, his hands reaching for the opposite end of the beam. "You're building something beautiful," he said quietly. "Mind if I help with the roof beam? That one's too heavy for anyone alone." His words hit deeper than he knew. Too heavy for anyone alone. Was he talking about the beam? About something else? About both pride warred with practicality inside me? My arms ached. My back throbbed where bruises were forming. My hands were raw from rope burns and splinters. And the beam still lay on the ground, mocking my determination with its immovable weight. "I suppose," I heard myself say, "just this once wouldn't hurt." We worked in silence. His movements were practiced and efficient. The work of someone who'd done this before, Many times before, we lifted together, positioned the beam across the walls I'd built. When it settled into place, perfectly level, perfectly true, I felt something shift inside me. Not defeat. Something more complicated than that. "I can help with the rest," he offered, not quite meeting my eyes. "If you'll let me." I wanted to refuse, wanted to prove I could finish alone, the way I'd started. But standing there beneath that beam we'd lifted together, I recognized a truth I'd been avoiding. Some burdens truly are too heavy to carry solo. And insisting on doing everything yourself isn't strength, it's stubbornness. "Mornings only," I said. "And I'm not paying you. Don't want payment," he replied. His voice carried such raw need that I looked at him sharply. "Just want to build something again. Anything. It's been a long time since I built anything that mattered." I understood then. He wasn't offering charity. He was asking for purpose. We were both trying to construct something from the wreckage of our separate pasts. "Mornings," I repeated. "We'll see how it goes." "Fair enough," he said. But even as we shook hands on it, I knew something had shifted. Something I couldn't quite name yet. Something that felt dangerous and necessary all at once. We developed a rhythm over the following weeks. Thomas arrived each morning as sunlight touched the prairie, carrying his own tools and asking, always asking, never telling where I wanted to start for the day. That distinction mattered more than I wanted to admit. I learned things in our silence, not just carpentry, though I learned that too. I learned that he measured twice before cutting once, wasting nothing. That he'd pause before driving a nail, ensuring perfect placement, as if each nail driven carelessly was a small dishonor to the work. His hands were calloused, but careful, treating every board like it mattered. Small kindnesses appeared in our shared space. Fresh coffee brewing when I emerged from my tent in the mornings. The sharpest saw always positioned within my reach. Tools cleaned and organized at day's end, ready for tomorrow. He never drew attention to these gestures, just left them like quiet gifts for me to discover. I caught myself noticing things too. The concentration on his face when he planed wood smooth. The way his brow furrowed slightly when something didn't fit quite right. The rare half-smile when a joint came together perfectly. When two pieces of wood met like they'd been made for each other. The way he'd step back sometimes and study the cabin's growing walls with something that looked almost like contentment. When did I start listening for his footsteps each morning? When did the silence between us stop feeling awkward and start feeling comfortable? When did I begin to miss the sound of his hammer? When he was gone one morning, about 3 weeks into our partnership. I found wildflowers tucked into the gap where a window would go. Prairie roses, simple and honest, their pink petals bright against the raw wood. "Thought the place could use some color," he said when he saw me looking at them. His voice was casual, but something in his eyes wasn't casual at all. My throat tightened. I didn't thank him with words. Couldn't find the right ones. Instead, I poured him coffee without being asked. Adding the sugar I'd noticed he preferred. 2 spoons. No more, no less. His surprised glance told me he understood the gesture's meaning, that I'd been paying attention too. We worked side by side that day, raising the final wall studs. Our movements synchronized without discussion, one person holding while the other nailed, then switching naturally, like we'd been building together for years instead of weeks. That afternoon, while he was adjusting a window frame. I realized I'd set out 2 plates for lunch. 2 cups, 2 sets of utensils. I hadn't consciously decided to do it. My hands had simply reached for 2 of everything, as if some part of me had already accepted what my mind was still resisting. When had that happened? When had one become 2? I watched him work, watched the careful attention he paid to everything, and felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. Something that felt dangerously like trust. We were building more than a cabin. Building trust, board by board. Building something I didn't have a name for yet. Something that both thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. That night, lying in my tent, I realized I'd stopped thinking about what I was proving. Started thinking about what we were building instead. The shift terrified me, but not enough to stop. 3 weeks into construction, a splinter drove deep beneath my thumbnail. I'd pulled dozens of splinters before it was part of the work, unavoidable as bruises and sore muscles. But this one lodged at an angle I couldn't reach, buried too deep for my own fingers to grasp. Blood welled around the wound, dark and persistent. Thomas noticed immediately. He had a way of noticing things I tried to hide. "Let me see," he said. "It's fine," I replied automatically, curling my hand into a fist against my chest. The word fine sat between us like the lie it was. "It's not fine. You'll get infection." He held out his hand, palm up, waiting. Not demanding. Please. That word please undid something in me. I slowly extended my hand to his, my fingers trembling slightly, not from pain, from the vulnerability of the gesture. His fingers were gentle as they steadied mine. He examined the wound with practiced care, his touch so light it almost didn't hurt. Almost. He worked the splinter free with efficiency born of experience, and I realized he'd done this before. For his daughter, probably for his wife. This small act of care was muscle memory, love translated into careful hands. "Thank you," I whispered when he'd finished wrapping my thumb in clean cloth. He didn't release my hand immediately. His thumb brushed across my palm, tracing the pattern of calluses that had formed there over these weeks of work. New calluses. Hard-earned. "You've worked hard for this," he said. "These hands tell stories now." Something in his voice made my throat tighten. Made me realize I'd been carrying this alone for so long. I'd forgotten what it felt like to share the weight, to let someone see the cost of my determination. I needed to prove I could do it alone. I said, the words came out rougher than I intended. Why, the question was so simple, so direct, so devastating in its simplicity that my carefully constructed defenses crumbled like dry earth. Because everyone said I couldn't. I admitted, because every door I ever walked through, someone asked when I'd marry. Like that was the only life worth building. Like everything else was just waiting. Marking time until I found a man to complete me. He was quiet for a long moment. His hand still held mine. Warm and solid and real. "I understand needing to prove things," he finally said, after Sarah and Emma died. I needed to prove I could survive without them. Spent 2 years proving it. Worked from dawn to dusk. Took any job offered. Kept moving. Kept working. Kept proving I could survive the loss. He paused, his jaw working. Know what I learned? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Surviving isn't the same as living. Building walls around grief doesn't make you strong. It just makes you alone. Makes you forget that hearts are meant to be used, not protected. Tears burned my eyes. When was the last time I'd cried? When was the last time I'd let anyone see me as anything less than perfectly capable? I'm scared, I admitted. The words felt like stepping off a cliff. Scared that if I let anyone help, it means I'm not strong enough. That I failed at the one thing I came here to do. The strongest thing my Sarah ever did was ask for help when Emma was born, he said quietly. Complications during labor. The midwife said later that Sarah saved her own life by admitting she couldn't do it alone, by asking for what she needed when she needed it. His voice roughened with remembered pain. Didn't save them in the end. The fever came later. Took them both. But that moment, watching her ask for help, watching her be brave enough to be vulnerable, taught me something important. Asking for help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. I looked past him at our cabin, at the walls we'd raised together, at the roof beam neither of us could have lifted alone. I'm glad you're here, I said. The admission felt enormous, terrifying, true. His hand tightened around mine. So am I. We sat there for a moment that felt suspended outside of time. Then he released my hand gently and stood, offering me his hand to help me up. I took it, and this time, accepting help felt like a choice rather than a defeat. The storm arrived the way spring storms did in Montana Territory, without warning and without mercy. One moment, the sky was clear. The next, clouds boiled up from the western horizon, dark and violent and moving fast. Thomas and I were on the roof, laying shingles, when the first gust of wind hit hard enough to knock me sideways. He grabbed my arm, steadied me. We need to get down. He shouted over the sudden roar of wind. Now. We scrambled down the ladder as the sky opened. Rain came in sheets, driving sideways with such force it stung exposed skin. Lightning split the darkening sky, thunder following so close the sound was almost instantaneous. I saw it all at once, our tools scattered across the property. The lumber pile unstacked and vulnerable, everything we'd worked for exposed to the storm's violence. "Get to your tent," Thomas shouted, pulling me toward shelter. "The cabin!" I pulled away from him, already running toward the lumber pile. We have to save the lumber. It's not worth risking. It's worth everything. I didn't wait for his response. The wind nearly knocked me sideways, but I pushed forward, reached the lumber pile, and started dragging boards toward the partial shelter of the cabin's interior. Thomas cursed behind me. Then I heard his footsteps. Felt him beside me, both of us fighting the storm to save what we'd built. We worked frantically. Rain soaked through our clothes in seconds. Wind kept stealing our progress, trying to rip boards from our hands. But we kept moving, kept dragging lumber inside, kept fighting. Lightning struck close enough that I smelled the ozone. Felt static electricity lift the wet hair from my neck. In that flash of impossible brightness, I saw Thomas's face, saw his determination matching my own. Thunder cracked directly overhead, so loud it felt physical. Thomas pulled me against him, his body shielding mine, his arms tight around me as the storm raged. We stayed pressed together, breathing hard, hearts hammering in sync. Water streamed off us both. I could feel his heartbeat against my ear, fast and strong. My arms had circled his waist without conscious thought, holding on to him, to this moment, to something I couldn't yet name. "We should stop," he said into my hair, but he didn't let go. "We're almost done," I said against his chest, but I didn't pull away. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. You say that like it's a bad thing." He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound loosened something in my chest that had been tight for longer than I wanted to acknowledge. We grabbed the last of the boards together, secured the tools, finished what we'd started. By the time we collapsed inside the cabin's partial shelter, we were both shaking from cold and exertion and something else. Something that felt like relief and triumph and terror all mixed together. The storm continued outside, but here, surrounded by the walls we'd built together, we were safe. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely audible over the rain drumming on the roof. "For staying, for helping save this." "Thank you for letting me," he replied. "This cabin. Working on it with you. It's the first time since I lost them that I felt like I had a reason to wake up in the morning." I turned to look at him. Water dripped from his hair, his clothes. He looked exhausted and alive and completely present in a way I'd never seen before. "I need to tell you something," I said. "I didn't come here just to build a cabin. I came here to prove I didn't need anyone, that I could be complete on my own." And now, his voice was careful, neutral, giving me space to answer honestly. Now, I think maybe I was wrong about what completeness means. Maybe it's not about doing everything alone. Maybe it's about choosing who you build alongside. The storm continued outside, wind howling, rain hammering. But inside our cabin, we sat together in the shelter we'd created. And for the first time since I'd arrived in Montana Territory, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. I felt home that night, alone in my tent, with the storm still raging. Fear settled over me like a physical weight. What was I doing? I'd come to Montana Territory with a plan, with purpose, with something to prove. And instead, I was falling for a widower still grieving his lost family. The darkness whispered all my old fears, all the doubts I'd tried to silence with determination and hard work. "You're not strong if you need him. You're failing. Everyone will say you couldn't do it alone after all. They were right about you. You were always too weak, too soft, too much of a woman to do this alone." And beneath those fears, something deeper and more painful. I'll be a replacement. A consolation prize. Second best to the ghost of the woman he'd loved and lost. I'd built walls around my heart the same way I'd built walls for the cabin, carefully, deliberately, making sure nothing could get through. But walls that keep everything out also keep everything in, including me, including any chance at the life I hadn't known I wanted until it appeared. Hammer in hand and grief in his eyes, asking to help build. By dawn, I'd made my decision. My trunks were packed. The cabin was nearly finished. Thomas could complete the final work himself. He was skilled enough, careful enough. He could sell it if he wanted, or live in it, or burn it to the ground. It didn't matter. I'd go back east or further west, anywhere I could prove the thing I'd set out to prove. Away from the confusing tangle of feelings that made me question everything I thought I knew about strength and independence and what I actually wanted from this life. Thomas arrived at his usual time. Just as the first light touched the eastern horizon, he saw the packed trunks immediately. His face went carefully blank in the way I'd learned meant he was feeling too much. "So that's it." "Then," he said quietly, "not a question, an acceptance. I can't." My voice broke. I forced the words out. "I can't be a replacement for what you lost." "Replacement?" He looked genuinely confused. "Is that what you think this is? Why else would you be here?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "You said watching me build awakened your hope, but your hope is for the family you lost, not for—" "Stop." He crossed to me in 3 strides, taking my shoulders gently, not restraining, just connecting. Sarah and Emma were my whole world. Losing them nearly destroyed me. I'm not looking for replacements. I'm looking for a reason to live again. There's a difference. I don't understand. "Watching you build this cabin," he said, his voice intense with the need to make me understand. "Your determination, your strength, your refusal to let anyone tell you what you couldn't do. It didn't remind me of what I lost. It showed me what I could still become. You didn't remind me of Sarah. You reminded me that life isn't just about surviving loss. It's about having the courage to build something new." Tears tracked down my face. I didn't wipe them away. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I came here to prove I was strong enough alone. To prove I didn't need anyone. And now I'm standing here needing you, and it feels like failure." "It's not failure." His hands slid from my shoulders, down to take my hands. "It's growth. It's learning. It's discovering that the strongest people aren't the ones who refuse all help. They're the ones brave enough to choose partnership when it's offered honestly." He released my hands, stepped back, gave me space to breathe and think and choose. "Always giving me room to choose. I'm going to ask you plainly," he said. "No pressure, no expectations. Just a question that deserves an honest answer. Do you want me to leave?" The question hung between us in the morning air. My packed trunks sat behind me. Escape. Safety. The life I'd planned. The cabin stood before me, partnership. Risk. Something unknown and terrifying. And Thomas patient. Grieving. Hopeful Thomas waited for my answer with his heart visible in his eyes. This was the moment. The choice that would define everything. Not circumstance, choosing for me. Not necessity forcing my hand. Just me. Standing at a crossroads. With the power to build my life the way I wanted it built. The question echoed in my mind. Do you want me to leave? And beneath it, the real question I'd been avoiding. What do you actually want? I looked at my packed trunks, at the cabin we'd built together, its walls solid and true. At the man who'd taught me that accepting help wasn't surrender, it was wisdom. "No," I said. My voice was clear, steady, certain. "I don't want you to leave." The relief in his eyes was immediate and profound. But he didn't move. Still giving me control of this moment. Still letting this be my choice. My terms. My decision. I came here believing that independence meant doing everything alone. I continued, the words coming easier now. That accepting help would somehow erase my accomplishments. Diminish what I'd built. Make me less than I needed to be. I stepped toward him. Closed the distance between us deliberately. consciously, choosing each step. But you know what I've learned these past weeks? Building with you hasn't diminished what I've done. It's multiplied it. Every wall we've raised together is stronger than anything I could have built alone. Not because I'm weak, because partnership isn't about weakness. It's about choosing to build something bigger than yourself. What are you saying? His voice was careful, hopeful, afraid to assume. I'm saying that the roof beam was too heavy for one person. I'm saying that some of life's best structures are built by two sets of hands working in harmony. I'm saying I took his hands in mine, felt the calluses that matched my own, the strength that had worked beside mine, the care that had taught me what partnership could actually mean. I'm saying I choose this. I choose us. Not because I need rescuing, not because I failed at being independent, but because I want partnership. Because building alongside you has shown me that real independence isn't about isolation. It's about having the strength to stand alone when necessary and the wisdom to lean when offered genuine. Support? He exhaled shakily, his hands tightening around mine. I choose us too. I choose building a life with you, not rebuilding the one I lost. I choose moving forward, together. Help me finish the cabin, I asked, though we both knew I was asking something bigger than that. Our cabin, he said, and the word our settled into my chest like a foundation stone. Not yours, not mine. Ours? Yes. I agreed. The word feeling like a vow. Our cabin, our choice, our life. We unpacked my trunks together. He didn't ask why I'd packed them. I didn't explain my fear. Some things were better acknowledged through action than words. We carried my belongings back into the tent, and the act of unpacking felt like a commitment more binding than any formal ceremony. Then we walked to our cabin, and stood looking at what we'd built. The walls rose solid and true. The roof beam spanned strong overhead. Every board and nail carried memory of the journey from strangers to builders to something more. We should finish the walls today. Thomas said, "Weather's clearing. The walls." I agreed. But I was thinking about other things we were building. Things that couldn't be measured in boards and nails, but mattered more than either. We worked side by side that morning, completing the final wall sections. Our movements were synchronized in the way they'd become over weeks of shared labor. One person holding while the other nailed. One person measuring while the other cut. A rhythm we developed without discussion, born of attention and care and growing trust. Around midday, I stepped back to study our work. The cabin stood complete now, its structure sound, its walls ready for chinking and finishing. But more than that, it stood as testament to what we'd built together. Proof that partnership didn't diminish individual strength, it multiplied it. "It's beautiful," Thomas said, coming to stand beside me. "You were right. It is something beautiful." We were right, I corrected. We built something beautiful. He smiled at that. A full smile this time, not the half versions I'd seen before. We did. That afternoon, we began the finishing work, chinking gaps between logs, installing the window frames properly, fitting the door that would open and close on what we'd created together. The work was detailed and demanding, requiring patience and precision. As evening approached, I realized I was happy. Not the defensive satisfaction of proving something to skeptics. Not the grim determination to succeed despite obstacles. Just simple, uncomplicated happiness. The kind that comes from building something good with someone who matters. We stood in the doorway as sunset painted the prairie in shades of gold and amber. Our cabin stood behind us. Our future stretched before us. "Thank you," I said, "for being patient, for giving me space to choose, for showing me what partnership could look like. Thank you for letting me build with you." He replied, "For giving me a reason to build again, for showing me that life after loss is possible." We stayed there as darkness fell, standing together in the doorway of what we'd created. Not just a cabin, a home, a life, a future built on mutual respect and shared work, and the courage to say our instead of mine. We finished the cabin in late spring, the day we drove the final nail. We stood back and looked at what we'd built together: solid walls, a strong roof, windows that let in light, a door that opened to possibility. Thomas and I married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in town. I wore my work dress, the one with patches at the elbows. He wore a clean shirt and vest, his hands scrubbed, but still bearing the calluses of our shared labor. We both had working hands, honest hands, hands that told the story of what we'd built together. Some folks in town still clucked their tongues, said I'd given up my independence after all, said I'd proved their point about women needing men. I smiled when I heard the gossip and let them talk. They didn't understand that real independence isn't about isolation. They'd never learned that strength isn't measured by what you refuse, but by what you choose. The cabin became more than shelter. It became home. The walls we'd raised together held laughter and quiet conversations. The roof beam we'd lifted as partners protected us through summer storms and winter snows. Every board, every nail, carried memory of the journey from strangers to builders, to lovers, to partners in all things. We added onto the cabin that first year a room that could be for children, if we were blessed, or for guests, or simply for the extra space that comes with building a life together. Thomas taught me to read the land, to understand weather patterns from the behavior of animals and the feel of the wind. He taught me to manage livestock, to recognize when a cow was about to calve, to doctor sick animals with patience and care. I taught him other things. Taught him that moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant honoring it by having the courage to build something new. Taught him that hearts are meant to be used, not protected. Taught him, slowly and carefully, how to open the rooms in his heart he'd locked shut after loss. We spoke about Sarah and Emma sometimes. Not often, but when the moments felt right. He told me stories about his daughter's laugh, about his wife's determination. I listened and understood that loving them didn't diminish what we were building together. The heart, I learned, has infinite capacity when given permission to expand rather than contract. Years passed. The cabin weathered seasons and storms. We added more rooms, a proper barn, fences that marked our land and our life together. The property that had been mine became ours, in every sense that mattered. Some afternoons, I'd watch new settlers arrive in the territory, watch women step off stagecoaches with that same determined expression I'd worn, that same need to prove something burning in their eyes. Sometimes I'd walk over, offer help with a heavy load or a difficult task. The roof beam's always the hardest, I'd say when I saw that familiar flash of defensive pride. Too heavy for anyone alone. Some refused my help. I understood that. Some accepted, grudgingly. I understood that too. A few asked questions. And to those, I'd tell my story not as instruction, but as offering. Here's what I learned. Here's what changed when I stopped equating independence with isolation. The best foundations, I'd learned, are built by people who understand that together isn't weaker, it's wiser. I'd come to Montana Territory to prove I could build a life alone, to prove that independence meant needing no one, depending on no one, owing no one anything. I'd been so focused on what I was running from the expectations, the limitations, the narrow definitions of what a woman's life should look like that I'd nearly missed what I could be. Running toward, instead, I'd discovered something better. I'd discovered that I could build a life in partnership, where my strength wasn't diminished by his support, but amplified by it. Where accepting help didn't erase my accomplishments, it multiplied them. Where choosing to build alongside someone wasn't surrender, but wisdom. The cabin we built together still stands. More than that, the life we built there taught me that stubbornness can keep you isolated. But partnership can make you powerful. The lesson reshaped my understanding of resilience, of strength, of what it means to be independent. Real independence, I learned, isn't about refusing all help. It's about having the strength to stand alone when necessary, and the wisdom to lean when offered genuine support. It's about choosing your partners carefully and building alongside them with intentionality and love. It's about understanding that hearts are meant to be used, not protected. That walls keep everything out, but they also keep everything in. I'd arrived in Montana Territory with something to prove. I'd stayed because I'd found something better. Someone to build alongside through all the seasons of life. Someone who understood that the strongest structures are built by two sets of hands working in harmony. That, I finally understood, was the truest independence of all. Not the isolation of one plate, one cup, one life measured by what you could do alone, but the strength to choose partnership, to build together, to say our instead of mine, and mean it as expansion rather than surrender. The cabin still stands. The life continues, and the lesson remains, solid as any foundation we build best when we build together.